fast can somebody be a victim of gun violence?
Welcome back to Indie Spirit Podcast, where we dive deep into the stories and struggles of independent artists around the globe. Today, we're tackling a topic that hits home for so many indie musicians: exploitation. You've probably heard the saying, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, and in the world of music, that can ring all too true. Remember, anyone can get a gig for free. From open mic nights to unpaid gigs, many indie musicians find themselves under pressure to perform for little or no compensation, all in the name of exposure. But here's the thing, while these opportunities might sound enticing, they often leave artists stuck in a cycle where their time, talent, and creativity are undervalued. Today, we're talking about why indie artists, especially those just starting out, are more vulnerable to exploitation than cover bands or more established acts. We'll dive into the dynamics of open mic events, the exposure versus payment trap, and why some organizers feel comfortable asking artists to perform for free, all while they pocket the profits. But we're not just complaining, we're here to explore solutions, talk about how artists can advocate for themselves, and shift the conversation about fair pay in the music industry. So grab your headphones and let's get into it, because when it comes to art, exposure is no substitute for fair compensation.
Okay, so we all love discovering new music, right? Like finding those hidden gems, those awesome indie artists who just blow you away.
Absolutely. There's just something special about that raw energy and passion you find in the indie scene.
Yeah, and I feel like most of us, we love going to those open mic nights or just scrolling through Spotify trying to find, the next big thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But have you ever stopped to think about the artists themselves and what they go through to get their music out there?
Right.
Like, what's the cost of all that exposure?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because on the surface, it seems like a pretty sweet deal, right?
Yeah. You did perform live, connect with an audience, maybe build a following. What's not to love?
Right, exactly.
But then you start to peel back the layers and you realize maybe it's not as glamorous as it seems.
Yeah, I mean, think about it.
What's
From
that?
the artist's perspective, a lot of times they're the ones paying to play.
Wait, what?
Yeah, you've got entry fees for performers.
Oh,
And then, the organizers, they're making money off the food and drinks.
right. Of course.
And sometimes they even charge a cover at the door.
Really?
Yeah. So the artists are bringing in the crowds, creating the whole vibe,
Right.
but they're the ones footing the bill.
That just doesn't seem right. I mean, the artists are the main draw, aren't they?
Exactly. They're the ones people are coming to see.
Yeah.
But the system is often set up in a way that benefits the organizers more than the artists themselves.
And it's like they're told to just be grateful for the exposure.
Mm-hmm.
But exposure doesn't pay the rent.
You got it.
Yeah.
Can't take exposure to the bank.
Exactly. And then there's the whole digital side of things. I mean, Spotify is great for discovering new music, but I've heard those payout rates for artists are like ridiculously low.
Oh, absolutely. It's a real problem.
So they're putting their heart and soul into their music, getting all these streams,
Yeah.
but barely making any money.
It's true. And it's not just Spotify. A lot of these streaming platforms are built on this model where the artists are getting the short end of the stick.
So how is that even sustainable for them? How are they supposed to make a living doing what they love?
Right. That's the big question, isn't it? And it's something we need to talk about.
Definitely. I mean, it seems like they're getting squeezed on both sides, both live and online.
Yeah.
So where does that leave them?
Well, unfortunately, it often leaves them vulnerable to exploitation.
Exploitation.
Yeah, they're so desperate for that break, for a chance to reach a wider audience,
Right.
that they'll often accept these unfair deals, hoping that the exposure will eventually lead to something bigger.
So it's like they're trapped in this system that's not really designed to support them.
It can definitely feel that way.
But it doesn't have to be this way, right? There has to be a better way for indie artists to get their music out there and actually get paid what they deserve.
I completely agree. And the good news is that there is. There's a growing movement pushing for a new model for indie music, one that prioritizes fairness and sustainability.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this new model.
Well, it all starts with education. Artists need to understand their worth and their rights. They need to know that exposure is valuable, but it shouldn't come at the expense of getting paid. It's about recognizing that music is a profession, and they deserve to be compensated fairly for their talent and hard work.
Right. Knowledge is power.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual knowledge, it's about collective action. Imagine artists banding together, using their platforms to speak out against exploitative practices and demand better treatment from venues and streaming platforms.
There's strength in numbers, for sure.
Absolutely. And it's not just about demanding change, it's also about exploring alternative models. Think crowdfunding platforms like Patreon or Kickstarter, where fans can directly support the artists they love. It's a way to cut out the middleman and build a more sustainable relationship between artists and their audience.
I've seen that work really well for some artists.
Exactly. And then there's the whole direct-to-fan approach. Imagine your favorite band bypassing traditional labels and releasing their music independently, connecting with fans directly through their website or social media. They have more control over their music, their earnings, and their creative vision.
So they're taking ownership of their careers and building a sustainable business on their own terms.
Exactly. And more artists are organizing their own shows and events, creating spaces where they can connect with fans directly and ensure everyone involved gets paid fairly. It's a way to build a more supportive and sustainable local music scene.
That's fantastic. But what about us, the listeners? What can we do to support this movement and ensure that indie music continues to flourish?
That's a great question, and it's one we all need to think about. As music lovers, we have a responsibility to be conscious consumers.
So it goes beyond just streaming our favorite tunes.
Absolutely. Think about it this way. You find a new band you love on Spotify. They're blowing your mind, and you want to support them. What's the most impactful way to do that?
I guess just hitting that repeat button on Spotify isn't really enough. I want to make sure they actually benefit from my love for their music.
Exactly. And that's where our listening habits come into play. Instead of just streaming that album on repeat, what if you bought it directly from the band's website? Or went to one of their shows and picked up a t-shirt or a vinyl record?
That's a much more direct way to support them, putting money right back in their pockets.
Exactly. Attending their concerts, buying their merch, sharing their music with your friends, those actions speak volumes. It's about going beyond passive listening and becoming an active participant in their success. And it doesn't have to be a huge financial commitment. Even something as simple as leaving a thoughtful comment on their social media post can make a world of difference.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
It's about building a community around their music. And that community is what sustains them, both creatively and financially.
So what we've learned today is that indie music exploitation is a real problem, from those seemingly harmless open mic nights to the complex algorithms of streaming giants like Spotify.
It is. But the good news is there's a growing movement towards a more equitable and sustainable model for indie music. And as listeners, we have the power to be a part of that change.
It's about rejecting the exploitative practices of the past and embracing a new era where artists are valued and compensated fairly for their contributions. And that's a future worth fighting for.
Absolutely. It's about creating a music ecosystem where passion and creativity can thrive, where artists can focus on what they do best, making incredible music without having to worry about being exploited or undervalued.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a challenge. Think about your favorite indie artists, the ones who move you, inspire you, make you want to sing along at the top of your lungs. Now ask yourself, how can I support them in a way that goes beyond just listening? What actions can I take to help them succeed and thrive. Because ultimately, their success is our success as music lovers and as a society that values creativity and artistic expression.
And the good news is it doesn't have to be this way.
Okay, good.
There are people out there pushing for change, trying to create a new model for indie music.
Okay, a new model. What does that even look like?
Well, it starts with education. Artists need to understand their own value.
Right.
They need to know that, just because someone offers them exposure doesn't mean they have to take it.
Yeah, exposure doesn't pay the bills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They need to realize that they deserve to get paid for their work, that music is a real profession.
Right.
It's not just a hobby.
So it's about empowering them to know their worth.
Okay.
But it's also about, collective action.
Oh, interesting.
What if all these artists out there banded together and use their platforms to speak out against these exploitative practices and demand better treatment from venues and from streaming platforms?
I mean, there's power in numbers, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, it's not just about demanding change. It's also about exploring alternative models.
Okay.
Like, what about crowdfunding?
Crowdfunding, yeah.
Platforms like Patreon or Kickstarter,
Yeah.
where fans can directly support the artists they love.
Right.
Cut out the middleman.
Yeah.
Build a more sustainable relationship.
I like that. I've seen a few artists use Patreon really effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And what about like a more direct-to-fan approach?
Direct-to-fan.
Yeah. Like, imagine your favorite band. They just bypass the traditional label system,
Wow.
release their music independently,
Okay.
connect with their fans directly through their website or social media. That's pretty cool.
They have more control over their music, their earnings, and their creative vision.
It's like they're building their own business, really.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
And, we're seeing more and more of this.
Oh, that's great.
Where artists are organizing their own shows,
Okay.
their own events,
Yeah,
creating spaces where they can connect with fans and ensure everyone gets paid fairly.
that makes a lot of sense.
It's all about building a more sustainable local music scene.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about what artists can do, but what about us? Like, what can we as listeners do to support this movement?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
As music lovers, we all have a responsibility to be more conscious about how we consume music.
So it's more than just, listening to our favorite songs on Spotify.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so what else can we do?
Well, let's say you discover this amazing new band on Spotify.
Okay.
You're totally blown away.
Yeah.
You want to support them.
Right.
What's the best way to do that?
Well, I mean, I could buy their music directly from them or something, right? Instead of just streaming it.
Yeah, like what if you went to one of their shows
Oh, yeah.
and bought a t-shirt
Well,
or, bought a vinyl record?
yeah. You know what? That makes total sense.
It's about,
Yeah.
putting your money where your mouth is.
Right. Putting money directly in their pockets.
Yeah, and, it doesn't always have to be about money.
Okay.
Even just leaving a comment
Oh, yeah.
on their social media,
Yeah.
sharing their music with your friends, all
Yeah.
those little things can make a difference.
It's about showing them that people care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That their music matters.
That's really cool.
It all comes back to building that community.
Yeah.
And that's what sustains them,
Right.
both creatively and financially.
Okay, so to wrap things up,
Yeah.
it sounds like indie music exploitation is a real problem,
It is.
but there's hope.
There is.
Right.
Yeah.
There are things that both artists and listeners can do to make things better
Absolutely.
and create a more sustainable future for indie music.
I think what's really inspiring is that there's this growing movement. People who are passionate about making a change, both artists and fans. And that gives me a lot of hope for the future of indie music.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I think, as listeners, we have a responsibility to be aware of these issues.
Yeah.
And to support the artists who are fighting for a fairer system. So next time you hear a song you love,
Yeah.
think about the artist behind it and what you can do to help them keep making amazing music.
Because ultimately,
Yeah.
their success is our success.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of indie music. I hope you learned something new and are inspired to support the artists you love in a meaningful way. Until next time,